In the heart of Manhattan, where marble-floored penthouses kiss the clouds and high finance breathes like a living organism, Ethan Grayson reigned. The name itself invoked respect, fear, envy. Ethan wasn't born into wealth, but he wore it like a second skin. A self-made man, or so the headlines claimed, who'd built an empire of investment firms, real estate ventures, and shell corporations that stretched from Wall Street to the Cayman Islands. His smile could charm senators, and his handshake sealed deals worth billions. But underneath the custom-tailored suits and perfectly coiffed hair was a man whose success was built on a bed of lies. From the outside, Grayson Capital was a monument to financial genius. But behind the doors of its sleek office tower, a different story unfolded. Pension funds vanished. Startups folded after being gutted by fraudulent buyouts. Families were ruined while Ethan hosted $10,000 plate charity galas and hobnobbed with Hollywood royalty. Whistleblowers disappeared into the shadows, silenced by non-disclosure agreements, threats, or worse. Journalists who tried to dig deeper were stonewalled by legal teams and public relations magicians. But all empires built on deceit eventually crumble. It started with a letter, anonymous, typed, and slid under the door of District Attorney Rachel Meyer's office. It outlined a trail of offshore accounts, fabricated audits, and insider trading that pointed directly to Ethan Grayson. Most would have ignored it. Not Rachel. A former federal prosecutor with a reputation for burning corruption to the ground, she began digging. Quietly. Patiently. She built her case like an architect builds a cathedral, brick by meticulous brick. As the investigation unfolded, Rachel uncovered a network of accomplices, manipulated records, and high-ranking officials who'd been bribed into silence. But the crown jewel, the piece of irrefutable evidence, came from a surprise source. Ava Lin, Ethan's former executive assistant. Young, sharp, and underestimated, Ava had been cataloging everything for years. Not because she was complicit, but because she had once believed in Ethan, until she saw his true face. When Ava walked into the DA's office with a hard drive and a trembling voice, she set into motion the fall of a titan. On it were encrypted files, secret recordings, and transaction logs that tied Ethan directly to a decade-long scheme of financial fraud, racketeering, and obstruction of justice. The trial gripped the nation. Every network, every blog, every corner of social media dissected the proceedings. Ethan arrived in court like a celebrity, smirking, confident, dressed in a navy suit that cost more than most people's rent. He thought his money could still buy him a way out. He was wrong. Rachel's prosecution was surgical. She laid out the evidence with a calm fury, connecting every crime to the man sitting smugly across the courtroom. Witness after witness stepped forward, former employees, defrauded investors, even a retired janitor who remembered shredding weird documents late at night on Ethan's orders. Ethan's defense team, the best money could buy, tried to spin the narrative: rogue employees, misunderstood tax filings, overzealous regulations. But none of it held. Especially not after Ava took the stand. Her testimony was the turning point. With tears streaking her cheeks, she recounted the moment she realized Ethan had embezzled retirement funds from a cancer research nonprofit. The room fell silent. Then came the final blow. Rachel played a recording, Ethan's voice, caught casually laughing during a phone call. "They're sheep," he said. "If they're dumb enough to hand me their money, they deserve to lose it." Gasps. Murmurs. Even the judge looked stunned. The jury returned in record time. Guilty on all counts. As Ethan stood to hear the verdict, the smirk finally faded. The mask cracked. No more tailored smiles or expensive suits could shield him from the reckoning. But justice didn't end in the courtroom. The fallout was just beginning. Ava Lin became a national figure, not for her proximity to Ethan Grayson, but for her courage. She used her portion of the whistleblower reward to start a nonprofit that helped victims of white-collar crimes rebuild their lives. Her first initiative? A fund to reimburse the families affected by Ethan's cancer nonprofit scheme. District Attorney Rachel Meyer gained nationwide acclaim. She was offered television appearances, book deals, even a potential Senate seat. She declined them all. "Justice isn't a ladder," she said in an interview. "It's a duty." Ethan Grayson, once a king of concrete towers and stock tickers, was sentenced to 175 years in federal prison. No parole. His assets were seized and liquidated. His penthouse became government property. His name, once etched in golden plaques, was now a cautionary tale taught in law schools and ethics classes. But time would pass, and with it, new ripples emerged. Years later, an independent investigative podcast revisited the Grayson scandal. Hosted by a former investigative journalist, the Grayson tapes reignited public curiosity, introducing new voices who had previously remained silent, former interns, clients who'd faced ruin, even a cousin who recalled a young Ethan's obsession with control and power. The podcast went viral, winning awards and sparking a renewed push for stricter regulations in the financial sector. Meanwhile, Ava's nonprofit expanded globally. With offices in 5 countries and hundreds of volunteers, she was now recognized as one of Time magazine's most influential people. Her organization became instrumental in exposing new financial crimes, and Ava herself was invited to speak at the United Nations on the power of ethical whistleblowing. Rachel Meyer, having served 2 terms as district attorney, eventually accepted a role as a federal judge. She continued her mission from the bench, presiding over some of the most high-profile white-collar crime cases in recent history. Yet, she remained humble, still commuting via subway, still refusing bodyguards unless absolutely necessary. In prison, Ethan Grayson faded into obscurity. No visitors. No interviews. Just a man surrounded by the consequences of his choices. At one point, he began writing a memoir, part self-justification, part desperate bid for relevance. He titled it The Price of Genius, and in its pages, he painted himself as a misunderstood visionary undone by petty politics and betrayal. However, when word of the manuscript reached federal authorities, legal action swiftly followed. The memoir was blocked from publication under the Son of Sam laws, designed to prevent criminals from profiting off their notoriety. Yet, somehow, a portion of the manuscript leaked online. The excerpt, bitter, unrepentant, and riddled with narcissism, ignited another wave of outrage and curiosity. Ethan's attempt to shape his own legacy backfired, reinforcing the public's perception of him as unrepentant and morally bankrupt. What remained was the story, a story of arrogance and justice, of betrayal and redemption, of power unchecked and the quiet strength of those who dare to challenge it. Because in the thread of time, no lie lasts forever. And the bigger the illusion, the louder its collapse echoes into the future. Extended Epilogue. In a twist of fate, the story of Ethan Grayson became the subject of a best-selling historical fiction novel titled House of Glass. Penned anonymously, it provided a hauntingly intimate portrayal of a man consumed by ambition and paranoia. Critics speculated the author might have been someone close to Ethan, perhaps even Ava herself, but no confirmation ever surfaced. The book was adapted into a Netflix limited series that won critical acclaim and reignited interest in corporate crime justice. Several scenes mirrored passages from Ethan's unpublished memoir, hinting at a possible leak. Back in the real world, a generation of young professionals cited Ava Lin and Rachel Meyer as their inspiration. Law schools saw an uptick in enrollment in ethics and public interest law programs. Financial firms revised their whistleblower protection policies, and a new Senate bill, named the Grayson Act, was passed, imposing harsher penalties for executive-level fraud. Rachel eventually retired from the bench after a storied career and took up teaching ethics at Columbia Law School. Students revered her not just as a professor but as a legend, someone who had stared down power and never blinked. She would occasionally guest lecture with Ava, their bond forged not just through tragedy, but shared purpose. And Ethan? Rumors of his demise surfaced occasionally, mostly unverified prison gossip. But those who had followed his saga knew better. The real end wasn't marked by death, but by the silence that surrounded his name. Because when a titan falls, it's not the crash that defines them, it's the void they leave behind. Epilogue echoes in the silence. Years passed, but the name Ethan Grayson still lingered, not in reverence, but as a warning. His empire, once a monument to ambition, became a ruin that taught a generation the price of unchecked power. Law schools dissected his trial. Business schools rewrote case studies. Ethics seminars played the courtroom recording where Ethan called his victims sheep. His voice, once a symbol of confidence, now echoed only as a cautionary ghost. And yet, something remarkable happened in the silence that followed his downfall. Ava Lin's nonprofit, now called Honor Reclaimed, became a global movement. Survivors of white-collar crimes found not just financial aid but dignity, community, and a renewed belief in justice. Ava never returned to the corporate world. Instead, she traveled from city halls to refugee camps, helping vulnerable people understand their rights and speak their truths. Power thrives in silence, she once told a crowd in Johannesburg. So we make noise. Rachel Meyer, now seated in a high court, continued her crusade against corruption. But her rulings were more than legal declarations, they were messages. To the quiet whistleblower, to the anxious public servant, to the young intern wondering if truth still mattered. Under her gavel, it did. As for Ethan Grayson, the man who once ruled from glass towers, he remained a ghost in the system. No further memoirs ever surfaced. Appeals failed quietly. The cell walls that surrounded him bore no plaques, no gold, no adoration. Just time. Endless, unremarkable time. But in that void, a question lingered. Not about Ethan, but about us. What do we do when the powerful fall? Do we move on, or do we learn? Do we rebuild, or do we merely replace one illusion with another? In the thread of time, stories like Ethan's don't just end. They ripple. And if we listen closely enough, we hear them, not as echoes of shame, but as warnings wrapped in truth, reminding us that the measure of a society is not in how it builds its towers, but in how it holds them accountable when they begin to crack.